Thank you so much for joining us today. Our webinar is Strengthening the Social-Emotional Health of Young Children Through Screening, presented by Jane Squires, Elizabeth Twombly, and Alicia Gennardi. My name is Amy Klaus, and I'm your moderator today. I'm the marketing manager for early childhood products here at Brooks Publishing, who's the sponsor for today's webinar. We're happy to offer all of our attendees a 20% discount at brookspublishing.com, and you can use the code that's on your screen, edWebASQ. That'll be good through the end of the year, and I'm going to share that. We'll share that discount also in the chat box and at the end of the presentation in the Q&A. And we're giving away 3 copies of the ASQ SE2 Learning Activities and More, which are resources that you can support the development of kids' social-emotional development with teachers and with parents. So those handouts, it's a book full of handouts, and Liz is going to be talking more in depth about the types of resources, and we're going to be sharing some samples from there. So 3 attendees will be selected at random in the chat, and then we'll email afterwards to congratulate the winners, and we'll post them in our edWeb community and announcement if you won. So now I'm happy to introduce today's presenters. So we have 2 developers of the Ages and Stages Social Emotional joining us today. ASQ SE2 is a social emotional screening tool used widely throughout the United States and around the world. Dr. Jane Squires is a leading authority on developmental screening, implementation of screening systems, early identification of developmental delays, and parents' involvement in monitoring young children's development. She served as a principal investigator on numerous research studies, and she's also the lead author on the ASQ3 screening tool and the SEAM assessment tool. For more than 20 years, Elizabeth Twombly has been involved in ASQ research projects, including renorming for ASQ SE and the ASQ3. She's conducted trainings on ASQ and ASQ SE nationally and internationally, and she's provided technical assistance to states on the development of early identification and referral systems for young children. And we're very happy to have Alicia Gennardi from Harmony Montessori School in Portland, Oregon with us to talk about her experience using social-emotional screening. Alicia is a trained Montessori primary guide with over 20 years of experience working with children from 3 to 6 years of age. She's been implementing ASQs for her school for several years, and she works to create a partnership with families in order to meet the needs of every child. So thank you to all 3 of you for joining us today. So Jane, I'll turn it over to you. I think you're going first.
So the training objectives for today, first, you're going to learn how to identify early behavioral concerns that parents or early educators are experiencing with young children. I think it's a particularly salient time right now in terms of social emotional health and trying to support families, young children during these really trying times of the pandemic. So I think that those of you who are on today probably have some great experience and also some questions, and hopefully we can help with answering those and improving services and supports for young children and their families. Second, discovering the importance of involving families in social emotional screening and follow-up. We feel very strongly that we can't just screen children for developmental or social emotional competence, but we really need to include the whole family constellation because, it's just so important to look at the family, how they can support the child, and what the child's needs are in that family. Finally, you're going to learn about resources that parents and early childhood educators can use to support children's social emotional development. And some of these will be provided to you, and some of them will give you links for that are available from Brooks Publishing. All right, next slide. So many of you indicated that you are completing developmental screening and social emotional screening with children in your programs. So screening is a brief, valid, accurate process that will identify children who are developing on schedule, identifies those children who would benefit from support in specific areas, and then identifies some children who really have needs that are substantial and they may need to be referred for further evaluation. So we see these 3 answers. Yes, this child's developing fine. This child has maybe less areas of strength, a few that they need supports in. And then the third option, we really want to take a closer look at this child so that we can figure out whatever else services that they might need. Excuse me. Okay, next slide. When we're screening for social and emotional development, most of us will find that most children are on schedule. So this is just a nice look. When parents are doing it, it's really kind of confirming to them to see, yeah, my child does have these good competence skills. They might have a few problem areas, but everything is just developing as it should. Many children will benefit from behavioral support. So Brooks has a lot of great materials on their website. There are also wonderful internet materials. I think we've given you some of those links, so that if a child is having maybe particular problems with sleeping, with making friends, there's ways that you can support both that child and the family. As I mentioned, there will be a few children who need in-depth assessment. So a screening doesn't say, this is what's wrong with the child. It says, you know, their development may be delayed. They may need some more support. Let's give them a more in-depth look. They need to go to that next level of assessment. And through this next level of assessment, some children may become eligible for behavioral health services. So that this would really help. And if we can identify these children when they're young, a lot of you are working with infants and toddlers, we can really make a tremendous amount of difference in their lives. So it's really nice to see that you're interested in screening and that you're ready to even add some more tools in terms of developmental screening. Okay, the next slide. So this is a little flow chart. We have universal screening, and that means that if a child's in your program, if they're in Head Start, if they go to the doctor, that they receive an assessment. So that if we screen in a whole bunch of different venues, hopefully no child will kind of seep through the cracks, because we know that often happens with children. So we want to do universal screening. On the left-hand side here, those children that are high risk or parent concerns, those are that small percentage that I talked about. Then those we want to give a further look to and see if they can, or if they are eligible for more in-depth community mental health services. For those children that that in the diagnostic evaluation do not qualify for services, then we'd still want to monitor them. If you look over at the very right-hand side, give parent support, give information, and some of these supports that we're going to talk about later. Universal, and back at the top here, the second, mild to moderate risk or parent concerns. I didn't really stress that even if a child passes or has scores that are below the cutoff on the ASQ SE, if the parent has concerns, we really need to give a second look to that child. So if they're parent concerns, then we may want to refer them. We certainly do want to give some support and see what resources are available in the community for them. And finally, on the right-hand side, as I said, the majority of children will have no identified risks. Parents may be able to say, there's 2 or 3 things we want to work on that you can help them with. But then we would want to continue monitoring them and to screen again in 6 months, whatever the you have for your program procedures. Okay, next slide. So why is it important to engage families? I probably don't need to tell early childhood people this, but we really see children in this whole ecosystem of their families. And unless we really engage the families, we really won't be successful once we've identified some concerns in ameliorating those concerns, and we really need the parent and the classroom to be working together for the child. Okay, next slide. So engaging parents and screening, it really shows that we respect families and family members as experts. They're kind of on our team. It really confirms the parent role as equal to partners. So we're not the ones that have the knowledge as providers, but the parents are really, they're equal partners and they're in this with us. And it really ensures that service delivery is not done to a child, but we're really designing it together and figuring out what will work and how we can get this child's skills back to where they should be, or where the parents are really saying that this is what we need so this child can really function well in our family or in the classroom. All right, thank you. And now I think Liz.
Okay, thanks, Jane. And then likewise, in terms of following up with parents, we're very specifically targeting those parent concerns, as Jane talked about. By responding to these early behavioral concerns, we can really try to support healthy parent-child interactions, which is really the foundation for that child's social emotional development. It's helpful to inform family about age-appropriate expectations. So parents may be having a lot of concerns about behavior, and some of that may be age-appropriate. Some may not be age appropriate. And so how do we help inform them as to what is kind of a baseline appropriate thing for a baby or a toddler or a pre-K child to be doing, and at what point does it become atypical looking? Follow-up provides information, resources, and support as indicated by the parents' concerns again. And by engaging families, we really empower parents to advocate for their children because they understand the issues. So the ASQ3 and ASQSE are parent and caregiver completed screening tools. They both are a series of questionnaires for children from 1 month up to 6 years of age. And they are tools that the developers have done a lot of work to identify, make sure that they accurately identify children at risk for developmental delays with the ASQ, and social emotional delays for the social emotional version, the ASQ SE second edition. Okay. The ASQSE, which is the one we're really focused on today, because we're going to be talking about behavior and supporting families around behavioral issues. This tool is really supporting the early identification again of young children at risk for social emotional delay. So as Jane was talking about, this isn't diagnosing, this is just flagging children who are at risk for potential delays. I think the second bullet here is really important. The tool is really designed to identify and respond to parent concerns early so that these behaviors don't become barriers to healthy relationships. And I'm sure many of you know, if you have a tricky kid and you don't know how, if a parent is really having a hard time responding to behaviors or the temperament of that child, it can really get hard in terms of the relationship between that dyad. So what we want to do is not wait till the child has a social emotional delay, not wait until they're a huge behavioral challenge. We want to respond as early as possible to those very early behavioral concerns that parents are identifying so that they don't become barriers. The questionnaires for the ASQSE, there's only 9 intervals, and they're at 2 months, 6 months, 12, 18, 24, 30, as you can see there. What's nice about that is if you're creating a monitoring schedule for children, those questionnaire intervals, those time intervals are very nice because each one of those represents different challenges that parents have with young kids, right? A 2-month-old looks very different from a 12-month-old. And both how you set up your environments and how you respond to children's behavior just looks very different. And some parents have strengths at 2 months, but 12 months when they're moving out and starting to move around in their home environments becomes extremely challenging. So checking in at these questionnaire intervals, at these different intervals, is kind of a nice monitoring schedule because you can keep helping them understand that behavioral stage of a child and what might work in terms of responding to them, because it looks so different at these different ages. So the SE, the social emotional version of the ASQ, is different from the ASQ in that it looks at both social competence behaviors, so those things we want to see in young children, as well as problem behaviors. It's the parents and caregivers, primary caregivers, who we really want reporting on behaviors. We want to know for the, again, supporting healthy child-parent interactions, what they are thinking about their child's behaviors and how they're interpreting those behaviors. So we are looking at it through their lens, as well as a parent might complete this tool in the home setting, but if we have children that we're seeing in school settings and teachers see that child enough, we can also assess the child's behavior in the school setting. It is not at all unusual for results to vary, for a parent to really be struggling and the teacher to report that things are going fine, or for things to be going fine at home and the teacher to be reporting that they are really struggling in that setting. When we really have concerns is when we complete these tools and everyone is reporting the same thing. They're both having difficulties with this child across settings, across different caregivers. That's a real concern for a child. But if it's a parent who's struggling, we can lean our intervention in their direction. If the school is having the struggle, we can try to support the teachers in that setting and the child in that setting to be successful. Again, we're really, really focused on behaviors of concern for how we're going to follow up with that child. The SE includes these general behavioral areas, so this just lets you know that all of the items that are placed on the ASQSE, the intent of that item is going to be found in one of these different behavioral areas. There's different numbers of items of questions depending on the age of the child that we might see in something like self-regulation. For the early questionnaires, the 2-month, the 6-month, we don't have any compliance questions because we don't expect our babies to comply. So they vary, and basically all of these behavioral areas is going to be making up this one area that we're screening, which we're terming social emotional development. Oops, okay. This is just an example from a first page of the 6-month questionnaire. One of the first things that you're going to see on the ASQSE questionnaires is something that says important points to remember. And what we're trying to do here, as you can see, it says answer questions based on what you know about your baby's behavior. So again, remember, we're looking through the parent's lens to get their interpretation of their child's behavior, and what they are observing and reporting on is happening in the home setting. We ask them to answer based on their baby's usual behavior, not behavior when their baby is sick, very tired, or hungry, because basically you will see all these problem behaviors when your baby is sick, very tired, or hungry. They are part of typical development for young children, all of the problem behaviors that we bring up. But what we are trying to tease out is how often are these behaviors happening, and are they a concern for you, or do you kind of know how to take care of it? So we want usual behavior. And then this last point is important, where it says caregivers who know the baby well spend more than 15 to 20 hours per week with the baby during their daily routine. That they really need to have a good understanding of the child's baby. I'm not the child of the child across the setting and a number of hours. And you can see there, it just gives you a couple examples of questions. When upset, can your baby calm down within a half an hour? Again, we're looking at how frequently does this behavior occur? Is it often or always, sometimes or rarely or never? So that gives us a clue as to whether it's a problem or not. And then we also, the second piece that's very important is for the parent to check if it's a concern for them, because we are always going to want to check in on concerns for parents. So those are some of the main features. To the far right, we have a scoring code, which I'm not going to talk about right now, but basically just want to let you know that what we're trying to gauge here is the frequency of the behavior by all those different scoring options, and then kind of the intensity of the behavior, which is the concern piece. So that lets us know, all right, children of this age are probably going to do this, and you might see it on a very rare occasion. But, is it a concern? How intense is it? Should we follow up on it? All right, and this is an example of our cutoff chart. So this is, after you've gone through all those questions, asked about frequency, asked about concerns, you get a total score for this tool, and you're going to be given this information, which allows you to figure out how much of a concern might it be for the family. We have 3 different result areas. So it's going to be that white area on the left, which is on track, on schedule. The point between, on this questionnaire, the 6-month, 30 points and 45 points, which will tell you if it's in the monitor area, this is between the 65th percentile and about the 80th percentile, where the cutoff is set, approximately there. At the very end of the chart, so to the far right, you will also get a number, and I'm not sure what it says there, but there's a number that indicates the 90th percentile, a total score. Again, any of these children that are in that darkly shaded area to the right are the ones we really want to be paying close attention to. It doesn't necessarily mean we need to refer them. We get a lot of results on the ASQSE that are elevated scores, but what that really tells us is we need to pay attention to this child and this family, and we need to give them some support, some guidance, some information to be able to bring those scores down so that they are more comfortable in their parenting relationship with their young child, that they're helping support this child. Whatever is happening there is helping to support this child's social emotional development. So the monitor area is also an area where we want to pay a lot of attention to. And again, it's going to be teasing out the level of intensity of that score. As you get to that 90th percentile, the far right, obviously, we really have a child who we need to be paying attention to and may very well warrant an immediate referral without trying some in-house types of interventions. Okay, so when we're interpreting results, I like to think of this as being a developmental detective on, you as service providers, that screening gives us some clues, and basically we can, be detectives trying to figure out what are our hypotheses based on these clues. Do we think the parents could use some support? Do we think this child could possibly need a referral to a healthcare provider? Maybe something's going on with their health. Is the child on medication? Have they experienced stress or trauma recently? They're just clues. And basically, like it says here, when these concerns arise, a conversation with the family becomes a service that includes inquiry, investigation, and possible follow-up. And this is a process that's done together with the family and will help ultimately choose what follow-up is most appropriate based on those results. So Alicia has been willing to share her experience using this tool within her school and using social emotional screening and also following up with families. So thank you so much, Alicia, for agreeing to talk today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. So we are a school located in Portland, celebrating 26 years this year, and we have a wide range of children ages 3 in a mixed age class, 3 through 6, and then also our elementary program that goes up to 12. So for the children who fall within the ASQSE, we typically send out the ASQSE and also the Ages and Stages questionnaire twice a year, both at the start of the school year and then again following up in the spring, usually around March. We have a range of children. We are an all-inclusive program, so we do have children with neurodiverse needs in our classroom spaces. So this helps both the families and us to start that conversation with them in terms of just keeping track of their child's development and making a collaboration and a partnership between the families and the teachers in the classrooms as well. So we are currently in session for school, but I know a lot of schools around the country are at home, and we provided the Ages and Stages questionnaires for them to fill out so they could do it at home this time as well. So we provided those electronically for them to do, the paper versions. And the results for when we give them 2 weeks so that it's a quick turnaround, so they basically do not age out. And I find that the Ages and Stages calculator on your website is a really handy tool to make sure that we are sending them the right one, and it's within the time frame that we need it to be in, so they don't age out of the questionnaire. For those scoring, we do recommend having somebody on your team who can, usually it's on our administration team. I'm that person that sends them all out and scores them all. And then I go from there to have a conversation with our guides, our teachers. So we take those results from the social emotional development, and if they're on schedule, then we go ahead and send out an email to those families letting them know, along with the follow-up activities that Ages and Stages provide for them to continue. It's kind of an ongoing thing. It gives them activities for them to continue to practice. And we let them know that we're going to assign again in 6 months. And for those children who score close to that cutoff or above the cutoff, we first check in with the teachers to see if they're also observing the same kind of behaviors in the classroom, because sometimes you get the parents seeing something different than what's at school. So that kind of gives us a baseline for maybe it's something at home that we can help support at home, or is it both both at school and at home that they're seeing those behaviors. We gather that information, and we set a meeting up to talk to the families. Right now, those are all through virtual meetings. But basically, we share the strengths of the children that we're seeing in the classroom first. And then we talk about any family concerns that they might have or questions they might have. And then just share our observations that we've seen in the classroom and allow them to share theirs. And we kind of establish that relationship with the families at that time. So these were some question and answers that I addressed in the slide here. Is I see a lot of you are already using the Ages and Stages, and probably for the same reasons that we are, is just to help support families in recognizing and seeing the developmental needs of their children. Some of them may not have had any prior experience, so they really don't have any other children to judge based off of. So this just allows them to see where their child is and how the school can help support their needs in the classrooms. We find this a really great holistic approach because it helps us to bridge a conversation with the parents and create a lasting relationship with them. And the teachers also find this information very valuable because oftentimes it backs up what they're already seeing in the classroom spaces. And sometimes it gives them an insight to maybe what the parents are seeing or what the families are seeing at home. And again, opening up that dialogue with them as well. For us, it was a process to transition, starting the Ages and Stages and screening on a regular basis. But once that process started, we just let everybody know, and it became a part of our enrollment process. And also, again, whenever we do re-enrollment each year. So it's just part of our paperwork that we send out at the beginning of the year. And now it's just part of the process the families go to. There's no negative connotation in doing it, except for time, making sure that they have the time to do it and making sure that you're letting the families know to do this at a neutral time when the children is well rested and well fed, and also that you space it out over time if needed, to be able to really ask the questions at the time when the children is willing and to participate and to make it fun as well. It's kind of an engaging time for them. Again, as I address some of these in terms of creating a culture within your school, it is really important to, we felt just to kind of make it across the board that this was something that we were going to do for every child that came into our school. Once we did that, it really was a change in our shift in our culture and the family's understanding. We weren't just picking and choosing the ones that the teachers might have had a concern about. We were really just doing it across the board. That was the biggest success that we had in implementing this program throughout Harmony. In terms of any tips, again, with the Ages and Stages calculator, I would recommend, and again, making it kind of a consistent pattern that the families know when to expect the Ages and Stages questionnaires coming. That helps for kind of down the road and just knowing what to expect. And then we found that just checking in personally with families as much as possible, connecting with them when the deadline is approaching. How's it going? Do you need any supports? Or do you need a little bit? They might need more time because they just haven't had the time with their child that they needed to be able to complete it. So just a gentle reminder in person is really helpful to kind of get that one-on-one and see what's going on there. And then also just making sure that you're sharing those results in a timely fashion. So making a plan for what that looks like within your school, who's going to do the scoring and how is that going to be implemented. We did find it helpful to have each of our guides, our teachers, take the Ages and Stages training so that they had a better understanding of what it was, and also for the scoring and what that looks like and what it means to be above the cutoff and below the cutoff and all those different pieces. We found that very helpful for them to have a better understanding of it. I will pass it back. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Alicia. Totally appreciate you sharing your experiences, and here is a private preschool with QRIS and whatnot. There is a lot more private schools that are starting to screen their children as part of their quality improvement initiatives. And I think, what you were talking about, Alicia, in terms of sort of some initial parent hesitancy, like, what is this? Really starting that conversation early during that initial enrollment, because it may not be something that parents are so used to. For some of our programs like Head Start, Early Head Start, our public health home visiting, some of those families are very used to filling out a lot of paperwork and filling out things that are associated with their child. Doing screening in general is so embedded in that culture. But I appreciate your strategies that you shared for kind of normalizing that and kind of getting over that initial family hesitancy, because they're like, what is this? If they haven't seen it at their doctor's office yet. In general, it seems like screening is getting more normalized and used universally, which is great. But some great tips and strategies. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about targeted supports. And many of you may be really familiar with this intervention prevention pyramid. Basically, this just says that in that green area, that all children, all families benefit from a universal system of supports. It's not like some parents don't need support. Everybody needs support in the parenting journey. And with screening, we will also find that, some parents here in this yellow area, some children are going to benefit from some targeted supports, things that are very specific to that child, that parenting, that family, that they will benefit from some more targeted supports. And then a few at the top there, again, these are our few who might need that ongoing assessment, that further evaluation, and that really need intensive types of individualized supports that perhaps only behavioral health or a real infant mental health provider is going to be able to offer up to a family. But what we find from the ASQSE is that we have so many families that just benefit from that green and yellow band there that really can help overall support their child's social emotional development. So again, we're going to use these targeted supports mostly with kids whose results don't indicate a need for a referral at this time. I mean, you may have these families that are really struggling, that you see it as imperative that you can, connect them with support, very intensive supports, very quickly. So those children, just feel free to refer on and make those connections with your behavioral health, infant mental health services as soon as possible. But as Alicia was saying, the ones that they follow up on are really in these monitoring areas, and also any items that behaviors may indicate concerns on, regardless of which result they fall in. If a parent indicates a concern, let's connect them with something, some level of information or support to help them understand that behavioral need or that their child is expressing and what it means and how we can help support them to respond to it. So one thing we can do when we're trying to figure out with parents what our next steps are is just talk about which routines of their day are challenging. These are going to be great times to problem solve the challenging behaviors, the social emotional concerns, what times of day are they happening, under what conditions, like, can you sense what's going on for your child? Maybe they're hungry before, this always happens right before a snack time, and once they have snack, they're doing okay. So problem solving through these sometimes helps us figure out patterns that are going on in terms of behavioral challenges and potential interventions based on learning what those patterns are. To make sure that we're pulling as much information from parents as possible, asking them, what are your ideas? Do you have any ideas why this behavior is happening, what your child might be trying to communicate with this behavior? What have you tried? How did it go? Do you have any other ideas of things to try? Who do you think should be involved in any possible follow-up? Who could help this situation that you can think of? And then to offer our information and supports that we have as service providers. Would you like, some suggestions? Would you like some information of things that have worked for other families, things that have been found via evidence-based research to be very effective with young children, such as positive behavioral supports? So really it is a partnership. We do want to know, and pull all this information from parents. And then we also want to acknowledge the fact that as service providers for young children, we have a lot to offer in terms of steering parents towards good quality information and support when they are struggling with their young kids. When we ask these questions, we want to make sure that what we're really doing is basically listening actively to what the parents are saying. Only through this true listening can we really understand the family's perspective or point of view. So just a reminder on that. You all know about good communication skills, but when things are getting really behaviorally challenging, I think both our anxiety increases for the family, for the child, and sometimes it's hard to remember to take a deep breath, calm down, and really try to listen to what the family is trying to share with you. We do have some specific resources that are linked to screening. And I think, though, regardless of what type of screening you're doing, I think the big takeaways are that, we're asking parents about concerns, we're asking parents about behavioral challenges. So we need to get our resources together to be able to respond to whatever comes up as a result of these screenings. For the SE, we've developed some activities. There's two different places where we have specific activities that are linked to the ASQ SE. One of them is in the user's guide, and that includes some developmental guidance, like what is typical at this age around social emotional development. So sometimes just normalizing a child's behavior helps a parent's anxiety come down, helps their concern come down, because they're like, oh, that's actually maybe what he's doing or what he's not doing is really age appropriate. So with the SE, we've created these, also a separate resource that isn't in the user's guide. It's a separate publication called the Learning Activities, and these have probably next level, more in-depth follow-up to any concern that may come up during the process of screening with the ASQSE. It includes newsletters. Again, those are kind of like the developmental guidance you'll find in the user's guide that just say, this is what's going on at this age. This is what your child may be feeling or experiencing. This is what you might be experiencing. Then it has a series of parent-child activities that are, just really designed to help support that parent-child bond. But then it has tip sheets that are age appropriate about specific topics that come up with screening. The feeding questions, sleeping questions, questions about helping your child regulate or calm down. There are specific tip sheets for each one of these types of things. And sometimes people forget that, children experience stress, trauma, they have behavioral challenges. Where you're going to see these challenges manifest is in things like feeding behaviors, sleeping behaviors, your child's regulation. All of those things are going to be impacted by stress. That's how they show it. So they're part of assessing social emotional development is making sure that feeding's going okay, sleeping's going okay. So we have specific resources to respond to some of those concerns. This gives you an example of all the different kind of resources in the learning activities. So you can see there at 2 months, you're going to have a newsletter, you're going to have some activities, you'll have a tip sheet for feeding, sleeping, calming, and then also some what we call special topics that may come up at that stage of development. So for babies, we have a tip sheet about body awareness, babies that are colicky, how you can care for yourself, childcare, what you need to be looking for in terms of childcare, and different special topics that come up at different ages. So that's just one way the learning activities are organized. Another way they're organized is by behavioral area. So if you're identifying that this child is really struggling in terms of self-regulation, you may pick one of, some of these. You're not going to give all of these to parents because it's just too much information. You're going to have to pick and choose which ones may be the most appropriate for the child. I think we gave you examples in your handouts of stress in your child, as well as for sure, stress. I think that's something that's coming up right now, and it's just great to have a conversation about how stress does impact young children. So sharing that with parents can be really helpful. You can help support parents because just throwing a bunch of paperwork, informational paperwork, even if it's good, isn't going to be helpful for a lot of parents. So reviewing the resources together, talking about, what they're experiencing and what these strategies are, helping parents to choose strategies or tips that might help support their priority concerns. Maybe let's try this one this week, and what will that look like, and when might you use it, and how might you need to word it for your child. Simplifying information, you may also need to do with many families, and just coaching them, just checking in. How's it going? How did that work? Did it work sometimes? Not at all? Do you want to try another strategy? So that ongoing coaching to help them try these, because as you know, some things work better for some kids, some work better for others. But also, if a parent tries something and it doesn't work immediately, sometimes they get frustrated and they go, oh, that doesn't work. So checking in and reminding folks that, sometimes you need to try things 20 times before it really sticks with a young child. Within your organizations and your communities, creating a map of available resources. This is obviously huge right now. Basic needs support being number one there. I really appreciate this slide. It's what Dr. Mary Weatherston, who has worked in Michigan in infant mental health for such a long time, but she talks about all these as being interventions, infant mental health interventions. And you can see like basic needs if the family has their basic needs met, that's hugely helpful in terms of their stress and their ability to give that nurturing back and forth kind of care that babies and young kids need so much. But we can help them with that by really getting in tune with our what is available to help them with basic needs. We can certainly help with them in terms of emotional support, the developmental guidance, the helping them with the back and forth types of, responding to their babies, responding to their toddlers in positive ways. So if you look at all of these, really the point of Mary Weatherston's infant mental health interventions, like all of these, is the fact that the only one that needs a trained mental health specialist is the last one there, parent-child types of play therapy, interactive therapies. And that's going to be that very top of the pyramid kids. Most families are going to respond to these types of supports, and those are infant mental health interventions because you're stabilizing the parents and the family system, and that helps them in turn be able to have the energy, the support that they need to be able to have something left to give their young children. And we can do a good job with this. And it's helpful to have a good map of what's available. So when things do come up, you know where to send parents to. Some of our favorite online resources that are related to social emotional development specifically are the following. The National Center for Pyramid Model Innovations particularly has a lot of great things for children pre-K age. They have a backpack series that, if a child's biting, just a very nice handout that explains how to respond to it, why it might be happening, all those types of things. 0 to 3 is a lovely online resource that has so many levels of different types of resources for families. I would encourage you to take a look at that. The CDC has a lot of great information in terms of milestones. And then the Center on the Developing Child at Harvard University, tip sheets, many related to stress and trauma, the impacts on the brain, both parent tip sheets and special topics, as well as things for providers and professionals. These resources for families, we have a lot available. The publisher has done a wonderful job, including information for that you can use with families. And actually, all of the developmental guides and parent-child activities that are available in the user's guide of the ASQSE are available for free online at Ages and Stages, or at this bit.ly address right here. So you can download all of those for families without any addition, as long as you have the tool. Again, the user's guide is where you're going to find that if you just want to look them up and see what they look like. But I would really encourage you to go to the Ages and Stages, those bit.ly resources, because there's a lot of beautiful ones that you can share with families. And the last thing I was just going to say is that we also did some webinars, and on that agesandstages.com website is a place where you can go to for virtual, what's it called, Amy? Virtual screening?
Virtual screening. I'll drop that in the chat box right now, because we actually received a question about how to screen kids remotely during this time period. So that's sort of a nice segue, I guess, Liz, to our Q&A. But I'm going to put, so right now I just put in the chat box, that's a resource page we created for programs that are screening kids remotely because of the pandemic. And Liz recorded 2 wonderful webinars, one on using ASQ3 remotely and one on using ASQSE2 remotely, how to do it as like an interview format and to discuss results through Zoom, FaceTime, things like that, and just different things to think about, because it is different than when you're seeing families face to face.
Yeah. I was just going to share that the ASQSE is quite easy to do virtually because you don't have to try items like you do with the developmental ASQ. So you just have to figure out a way to interview the family remotely, and then again have those conversations and share resources to respond to concerns.
Great. So now we're going to switch to taking questions. So I do have a couple questions that have been submitted. And then if you do have questions, please go ahead and type them in. So we'll start taking questions. Alicia, we had one for you. One of the listeners wanted to know, do you do any other assessment tools at the beginning of the year with as your kids are coming back to school with your families?
We don't do any assessment tools necessarily with the families. We do some reading assessments, dibbles. We use dibbles in our classroom. Yeah, so we do those assessments, but that's typically after the Ages Stages. And I wanted to make it clear that we don't use it as a means to enroll. They are already enrolled, and then this is just a part of their paperwork. Because I saw that somebody questioned that in the chat, that parents can be shied away if they're thinking this is going to be determine their enrollment at our school, and that's not the case.
Right. That's a good point. Good point. We had one listener who asked, so do you recommend doing these screenings before children start school? So I don't know, I guess broadly, yeah.
Yeah, and the reason we do that is because it helps us to determine the classroom placement so that we're kind of sharing the needs within the different classrooms, as opposed to having a lot of children with different supports and needs in one particular classroom. So it is a part of our process, and it allows us to balance that out a little bit better.
Great. Thank you. Liz, we had a question from one of the listeners. Can anyone administer screening, or is specific training needed to know how to administer and score and share results for ASQ?
It's very helpful to have training, but no, you do not need training. Technically speaking, there are a lot of good introductory materials for training that you can find again on the bit.ly site that Amy shared, agesandstages.com. And that can really familiarize yourself with the ASQSE. Also in the user's guide, there's a chapter about administering the ASQSE that really can give you a lot of the basics. It's super helpful to have training. You know, I've just heard that from people who do receive training, because they get all their questions answered. And, you know, as Alicia was saying, it just is helpful for everyone to be on the same page and understanding the tool in the same way. But no, you don't need, technically you do not need to, you just need to kind of inform yourself somehow if you don't get training.
I did also just put a link to, we have a training portal on the ASQ website that has some very introductory PowerPoint presentations that might be helpful to take a look at. And then we had one listener who commented in the chat box that she did an ASQ training recently for one of her local preschools. That URL I sent also has some training handouts that might be helpful if you are giving trainings, some things you might want to share.
Mm-hmm.
So let me go to our question box here. So Liz, how often, and Jane too, if you can still hear us, how often do you recommend screenings be done for preschoolers?
Well, sorry. You know, I think Alicia's model is great, like twice a year, because you kind of get the sense at the beginning of the year what's going on in supporting parents, and then again a few months later. But as I said, the questionnaire, the way the questionnaires fall out is like 36, 42, 48. You know, kind of every 6 months, and that's those are very nice a nice monitoring schedule to try to jump in there every 6 months and just make sure everything's still going okay, and that parenting journey is still being a positive one in the home environment. Because again, in schools, kids, you know, you kind of have it set up in a kid's environment. You know, it's like, oh, follow the child's lead. It's developmentally appropriate. They kind of move at their own pace. Often kids look really good at schools because it's kind of like, yay, you know, I'm in school. But at home is where they let their defenses down, right? It's where parents get to see all the behaviors. You know, kids often hold it together. So you want to, even though things seem like they're going fine at school, checking in with the parents to make sure their parenting journey is going well is also important.
We also, I just wanted to add, and you can maybe share your opinion. We also do it at 3 months if they're within the monitoring zone, and we're seeing it at both in home and school or above the cutoff. So we do it increasing
Yeah.
Instead of the 6 months, we will do it at 3 months instead.
Oh, that's perfect, Alicia. That would be our recommendation. If you don't make a referral based on the results, and what you want to do is try some of those in-home interventions, and promotional activities for young kids, checking back in sooner with the ASQSE is a very good model. So yeah, that's perfect.
Great. And that's sort of, Liz, as you were talking about how sometimes things are different at home and at school, this kind of segues to, I think, what'll be our last question, and then we're going to follow up with all these questions in a nice like Q&A in our community, which we'll share via email. But so we have a couple listeners who are asking, what do you do if a parent is completing the questionnaire and then the child's teacher is seeing something different? So should you have both of them complete the questionnaires and then discuss, or how do you recommend handling that?
Well, maybe I'll answer first, and then Alicia, you can share how you guys do it. But with the ASQSE, I'm actually glad this one came up, because it is not at all unusual to have completely different results at home and at school. You want, with the social emotional version, you want those administered separately. If a teacher wants to complete one, that is great. But we want the parent one to be kept separate. And it's just information that we're gathering to make decisions. With the ASQ, which is the developmental one, we recommend you combining the results, but this is focused on the social emotional. For this one, again, we are assessing that social emotional development separately in each setting. You don't combine results, you just use that information to do your detective work. Alicia, do you have anything else to share about that?
No, I agree. That's exactly what we do, kind of gather the information that the teachers are observing and then use that to say, I see this is what you marked on your questionnaire. This is what the teacher is observing. Can you share with us? So we just use it as a talking point to kind of start that bridge. And yep, exactly.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. So I know we have a lot more questions, but we want to honor our time frame here. So we are going to compile all of the questions and send them out into a nice Q&A. We'll send it out via email so everyone can read the answers. Before we sign off, I just want to share the agesandstages.com. I've linked it several times in the chat. There's more than 300 handouts and infographics and articles you can share. We have lots of materials in Spanish. And there's a searchable knowledge base with more than 300 questions. So I really encourage you to check that out. And then I wanted to share links to our social media channels for ASQ. So if you can join our newsletter. We send a monthly newsletter with lots of tips and articles, and also on our social media channels if you're interested in doing it there. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to our presenters, and thank you to EdWeb for hosting our webinar. We were really happy to share this information with you, and we look forward to continuing the discussion in our EdWeb community about social emotional screening. It's an important topic and growing more important every day, it seems.